On the night of April the 10th, 1948, Irgun soldiers surrounded the sleeping village of Deir Yassin near Jerusalem. What happened that night still fills Arabs with horror and a growing number of Jews with shame. Taken back to the scene after 35 years, the villagers remember.
اللي كانوا في سن ال20 وال25 وهذا شو كانوا يعملوا؟ كانوا يبكروا بطونهم الفران وابنه انحرقوا في الفرن مع ابنها انقتلت في باب دارها عامل خبز وعامله ابنها
قتلوها، قتلوا عمتي وقتلوا عم الحاج وقتلوا ابنها محمد.
اجل يهودي مسك شد والله في اوريك كيف هذا شد اليهودي صار يشد في هذه يسحب في هذا لما ما سحبش مسك هذه وذبح فؤاد ذبحوا على بطن على صدر امه.
يعني النكيز لو منعوا اليهود ما صارش في بلدنا هيك، كان ما طخونا
ولو حكيت بعدين
ربونا مثل اليتامى، مين المسؤول عن اللي بربي ولد؟ لما انت بتربي ولد وبيجي واحد بكتله، انو المسؤول عنه؟
The Haganah admitted that some 250 people had been massacred at Deir Yassin. The British did not intervene.
As far as I'm concerned, it did not come within the province of any of the conditions of which I laid down. But it was such a horrific thing that we felt that something ought to be done.
In the event, the British did nothing. The Haganah told Macmillan they were in charge of the village. For him, that was good enough.
So the priority then was to save British lives, but not Arab lives.
That's right. That's right.
As news of the massacre at Deir Yassin spread, the Palestinians began to flee in panic, some at gunpoint. Jewish forces stepped up their attacks on Arab villages and towns.
In many cases, they found themselves caught between, let's say, the devil and the deep blue sea, if you like. Since we blew up the installations or the houses within the villages, maybe they were terrorized by the terrorists, maybe they were not. I don't know. Then they were afraid, and in some cases, and quite a number of them, they left the villages.
The Arabs were uprooted from their country by Jewish violence, or Zionist violence, you might like to call it. They didn't leave voluntarily. And if they had left voluntarily, they should have permitted them to go back. It was a plan to panic the Arabs and force them to leave the country. That's how they left.
In the end, more than 750,000 Palestinians were dispossessed, driven from their homes by force or fear. Most found shelter in makeshift camps, which later became their permanent homes. Hundreds of villages, even towns, were to be left deserted. Under the noses of the British, the Zionists expanded their territory across 3/4 of Palestine. In desperation, the Palestinians looked to their neighbors. The Arab states had promised to defend Palestine. But whether for the Palestinians or for themselves had never been clear.
We decided to set up a shadow government for the whole of Palestine. So when the British withdraw, it will take over the country. We couldn't do it by ourselves. We had to obtain Arab support. The Arab states did not see our point of view due to American and British influence.
The Arab armies were equipped by Britain. In an attempt to avert war, Bevin set up a deal with Abdullah, King of Jordan. When the British left Palestine, Abdullah's Arab Legion, under its British officers, could annex the Arab part, provided the Arab armies kept out of the Jewish part. The Zionist leaders were tipped off.
On one occasion, I was in the delegates' lounge of the United Nations talking with Colonial Minister Creech Jones and Mr. Charette of the Zionist group. just the three of us, and at one point, Mr. Creech Jones turned to Charette and said, "We know you're going to have your Arab state in Palestine, your Jewish state in Palestine. Of course, the Arab Legion would move, but it will move only into those areas assigned to the Arabs under the partition arrangement." Well, Charette, of course, took that as a statement of the greatest possible importance because the Arab Legion was the only effectively organized force in the Arab world, and it was under British command.
Despite the secret maneuvers of the British, their imminent departure now threatened to unleash war. Volunteers flocked to join the Arab armies as they gathered on the borders of Palestine. But their vast numbers gave a false impression.
We never had an army to fight with. Why did we get in with this war? We had simply, the British didn't let us have an army. They let us have a few soldiers for receptions and for protocol and for drums and music, not for guns. So Britain is responsible for the weakness of the Arabs, but the Arabs themselves are to be blamed for lack of knowledge, lack of preparation, lack of unity. That's my view.
We were not going to help either side. I mean, we were, I think there became perhaps a bit later this agreement with the Americans that they would not arm the new state of Israel, in return for which we would stop our sending of arms to Arab countries.
On the 12th of May, 48, and I was still much younger than I am now, I was the head of the operations, I was summoned suddenly by Ben Gurion to an emergency meeting of the temporary government of Israel. It was on a Wednesday, and about 10 of the 13 members were sitting there, and Ben Gurion said to me, "We are about to decide to declare the state of Israel the moment the British will quit on the 15th. But members here would like to know from you, objectively as you can, without any expressing your own feelings whether a state should be declared or not, what are the chances of us defending this future state if the British will leave and the Arabs will invade the country?" I must say that this was the most difficult answer I ever had to give. And the gist of the answer was that I said that it is 50-50.
My feeling, and most of our feeling, was this: that the Arabs were going to fight us whether we established a state or not. Therefore, why not establish it? Let them fight against us as a state and not fight against us as an anonymous community.
On May the 14th, 1948, the British High Commissioner took leave of Jerusalem for the last time. There was no United Nations authority to take his place. No one turned out to cheer or even boo as he left by the back streets for Haifa. The next day, David Ben Gurion proclaimed the State of Israel. Its gates would be open to the 100,000 and more, as long as they were Jewish.
The British said that it was their duty, because of their common and dual duty to protect both the Jewish and Arabs, to behave the way they did. We didn't think so, but the Arabs didn't think so either.
Did they have a grudge against the British? They did, and they still have it. We believe sincerely that the cause of our plight and the establishment of a Jewish state in Palestine is British.
We have been forced into this policy which we would not have chosen ourselves. But the policies we had wanted to follow had not been acceptable to other people, so we had washed our hands of it.
Palestine, the peaceful land the British took over, they turned into a battlefield. Their departure evoked worldwide contempt. The war that began as they left has not yet ended.